startup that manage properties also. And from my experience, for like people who has no record on the finance, they have difficulty to apply for credit. As you mentioned earlier, the bank also really keen to give more credit, but so far what I can from the situation that I can see, not many of them can buy because of they are not bankable, and what do you call that? But actually they have money, and then eventually people who's becoming investor only who will buy that one, and finally the purpose of making Superblock to help like medium level cannot be achieved in maximum way. Is there any what do you call that? A plan or something solution to solve this problem from the banking side?
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, that the appetite of banking to finance property, I think, is there, yeah, because if we look at the ratio again, the mortgages is very low, only less than 10%, yeah. So I think I don't agree with the statement that we are not keen to finance consumer or to property buyer to be financed by the bank, because it depends again on the banking liquidity. Yeah, you cannot uniform bank buku 3 and 4 with smaller banks, because they have different liquidity condition. Yeah, because nowadays banking industry is push. Yeah, is designed to also manage their liquidity, because as we know currently rupiah yesterday on Friday decline or drop 13,500, so that's why they need to manage their liquidity. And as we know also DPK the deposit growth also dana pihak ketiga also decrease currently. So I think that's why the source of fund banking is very limited. Yeah. So I think going forward, yeah, I'm hope that tax amnesty will give some positive contribution to the banking liquidity. So that's why after the liquidity is improving, yeah, I think there is a strong connection with the financing some from the bank. At least, yeah. As long as they fulfill their requirement and so on, I think there is no tendency of banking to slow the process or everything, because every banks currently they're trying to speed up their process. Yeah, maybe 14 days to 15 days. But yeah, I think that's it.
As far as I know, bank doesn't want to give if it is still under the developer. The name is not belum AJB ya Pak.
Yeah.
Gitu.
It is basically because of the regulation, yeah. Because banking is very highly highly comply with the regulation, yeah, so far. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, if there is any tendency of maybe property sectors is contracted, yeah. So I think government and Bank Indonesia, I think, will also support, yeah, to have to loosen their policy. Yeah. On the other hand, if there is a condition where there is a very bubble condition, I think Bank Indonesia and government will also tighten the liquidity, the regulation. I think it depends on the market itself, yeah, currently.
Thank you, Joshua. Craig, sure.
Just sort of digressing a little bit. You know, we talk about affordability. The lady here at the front asked a question about that before, and availability of mortgages. Joshua's area of expertise. I think we all know mortgage penetration in Indonesia is very low. you know, I mentioned earlier about drawing from experiences in other countries, and although Indonesia is very unique in so many ways, the reality in what I could call a normal market, if we could say what's a normal market is where in an urban area you would be able, there's transparency and liquidity. So if you're an investor and you want to invest in real estate, buy a property and get a return, if you are able to demonstrate to the bank that you've got the ability to, you know, repay your mortgage, that's important. And Joshua talked about, you know, the tax amnesty. Let's hope that that has a positive impact on the economy by bringing a lot of cash, you know, out from under the table and onto the table so people could see it. I think a lot of banks probably, you know, people are asset rich but cash poor. I'm sure that I'm not a banker, but if I'm going to lend someone some money, the most important thing I want to know is how am I going to get paid back, and how is the borrower going to be able to service the loan. So maybe now with the tax amnesty, let's hope that that has a positive impact on transparency and creates more liquidity. Because as I say, in a normal market, we talk about affordability of housing. It's not just to be able to buy the housing, it's also to be able to rent the housing. So investors, when we talk about who's buying all of these apartments, often that's not very transparent either. You know, what is the motivation of people buying off the plan? You know, are they going to occupy the property? Are they going to rent it out? Are they going to keep it for their family? If they're going to rent it out, who are they going to rent it out to? Who will be the tenant? I think in days gone by, and I think with a lot of property, people would like to think that you know, an expat or a foreign company may take a lease over rental property. But let's forget all of that. In the future, it's not about foreigners or expats. It's about Indonesians being able to afford housing, whether it's for purchase or for rent. And in the future, we want to see more properties available for rent in suburban areas, thereby providing an avenue for property investors to get a rental return as well as a capital return. Joshua talked about, you know, how housing prices going up. It's got to be sustainable. I mentioned earlier that prices were flat for so long, and then they spiked. They were going up 15% per annum through 2010 to 2014. That's not sustainable. Last 2 years, they've pretty much been flat. I think there is pent-up demand for residential property. I think a lot of people have been sitting on their hands. Prices haven't really moved. That will change. Whether it happens in the short to medium term throughout 2017 or it takes a little bit longer, we'll wait and see. But confidence and sentiment are very important as well. So all of these factors combine, really, I mean, you know, maybe it sounds a bit idealistic, but having more transparency and a deeper understanding of what makes these markets tick and what will stimulate demand, what will create more affordable accommodation is very important for the future.
Thank you very much. Pak Eko?
Yes, I'd like to add, being an ex-banker myself, I think the issue with affordability is a real critical issue that need to be addressed by both the banking institution itself and regulator and by the developer. Because, for example, when we define what is a middle class, would somebody with 20 million rupiah salary per month on net qualify as middle class? If that is the rules, then as a bank, we will only lend maximum 30% against his monthly income. Okay, so 30% against 20 million, that's mean only 6 million. That's cover for principal as well as interest. And with that, if you work it back, the maximum pricing of a house as a rule of thumb is probably 40 to 50 times your monthly salary, that's 1 billion. And there isn't not much house in that kind of price. You know, you either go for the very low price. I mean, if you try to find a house in BSD, Alam Sutra, I think it's very difficult to find a house with 1 billion. Part of the issue is the tenor. The maximum tenor now bank lend, I think, is 10 years, and that is because of the structural in their funding, the tenor mismatch. If they can make it to the retirement age, so for the first time buyer, they probably enter the market at around 28 years old. And if they can borrow up to the 55 years old, so that's mean about 27 years, I think then the pricing, the house can be more affordable. So that is the homework of the banking institution. But on the other part, the developer also need to see that there is a big opportunity actually, which is being left out, being untouched. A lot of the people who I own several properties. Whenever I go, people who come and buy are mostly speculators. You know, they are not going to live in the apartment. So that's why you see a lot of superblock, mixed block, maybe only occupied by 30%, less than 50%. And in the meantime, the middle class is striving to look for affordable housing. And this is where I think the government should come into the pictures by having some control on affordable housing, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to address my question to Pak Ilham. Pak Ilham, most of us know that our government very focused to build the infrastructure now. And as one of the developer who has built Superblocks outside Jakarta, and it's big success, what do you think where are other area outside Jakarta, Surabaya, Batam would be a good area to build another Superblock based on the government plan and also your expertise in that area? Yeah, and then I would know the reason behind that.
You have to pay for that advice.
Thank you.
Okay, talking about the government plan, I think all of us know so-called maritime access, right? You go from west to east, all these big ports. Because a lot of things that are connected, that are important to know about Superblocks is there needs to be some sort of a connectivity in a larger sense, right? Not only, I mean, we talk about connectivity in terms of pedestrian, maybe there's something like IT, but in fact, I believe that the development of that urban center needs to be connected to other things, not only happening in that city, but around the city. And I think a major driver in the future in Indonesia will be that access, marine access or maritime access. So you're talking about Medan, Jakarta, Surabaya, Makassar, Sorong. I don't think Sorong is the large urbanity at the moment, but the other four, I think there's going to be a lot of things happening. Right? You have the major port, and you have an airport. I think in all of them have major airports. I mean, we have seen Kuala Namu in Medan now. Actually, the only one in Indonesia that has a rail connectivity right now. You can take the railroad from the city to the airport and vice versa. That will be happening here in Jakarta, I think. In Surabaya, I haven't seen it so far. In Makassar also not, but at some point in time that might be happening. So I think that would be certainly something I would look at. How are these major hubs, call them hubs, and it's not only about being a marine or maritime hub, but actually how do you actually, if you have the goods or the people in that hub, you have to connect it to the surrounding area. So, and all of them are significant, I think, right? So that would be one thing. Then another would be centers of economic activity in outside those the exits like Balikpapan, for instance. Balikpapan is also a major development, particularly for East Kalimantan, Palembang, right? Or Pontianak, I'm not so sure, but Manado perhaps at some point in time. And right now we have seen the opening of Manado being a new established hub for airplanes. I mean, you can fly direct from China, from Taiwan, from Korea, and people come in big numbers, right? I mean, they come and come and come. And I think also in the past, what you have seen, unfortunately, that's the case in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had a lot of unrest in the eastern province, particularly in Maluku. So many people have moved to the traders. They have all moved to Manado. If you go to Manado, it's a different city now than, say, 20 years back. Right? It's very diverse. It's not only Manadonese, but it's a lot of people from the east, so it's or northeast, I should say. So I think one needs to look into the logic of how Indonesia is developing, not only as a country, but also regionally within Indonesia. And the case of Batam is a very special case. I haven't seen another growth area like that. I mean, people talk about the growth area, say, between Malaysia, Philippines, and North Sulawesi, or Aceh, and Thailand, and Malaysia. Yes, these two growth triangles exist as a concept, but I'm not a great believer in that. But that would be my personal opinion, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilhelm. Question in the back.
You know, listening to all this conversation about Superblocks, it strikes me, Ilham, you talked about reference to Hong Kong and Singapore, and you couldn't look for bigger Superblocks than Hong Kong and Singapore. Those were initiated, conceptualized by government, executed private sector. Here in Jakarta, for example, if we talk about a 4 or 5 or 6 hectare development, what model would you take? Would you take a public sector initiating, private sector executing? How would you go about that? I have my views, but I'd like to hear yours.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I so far the development of property in Jakarta, and I'm really not the expert here. I think the gentleman on my left know much more. Ask me something about airplanes, I can give you a good answer. But I think that in Jakarta, particularly Jakarta, which is going to be a model, I think, for other cities in Indonesia, because the government has to be more proactive, I think, which they are, and they have to be sticking to the master plan. I think in the past there was always something like a master plan, but the private sector had too much power over the master plan to somehow tweak it to whatever they need, and that's the result is what we have right now. Right? So I think we need a little bit more alignment regarding a master plan, which needs to be, that alignment needs to be done by government, right? Whether then the Superblock itself will be then, who is the protagonist? Is it going to be government or is it going to be private sector? I think it should be private sector. However, in Jakarta, we do have private companies where the government of Jakarta has a share. Right? I mean, the famous Jaya, Pembangunan Jaya is one famous example how a government entity, or semi, I should say, because government is actually in minority, I think, they have become very visibly proactive and quite successful, I think, in driving larger projects in Jakarta. But I think what we have seen in Jakarta, the mushrooming of many areas which are, well, you ask yourself, should that have been a development at all? Like in areas which are permanently, whenever you have a flooding, they're always underwater, because I believe that there shouldn't have been a property development in the first place, because the whole area is below zero, and it has to do also with the flowing. I mean, Jakarta is a little bit like Venice. I mean, you have a lot of rivers flowing through Jakarta, at least 5 or even more. And all of that has not really been taken into consideration whenever decisions were made where or where not to build something, not only a superblock, but anything. And in order to avoid these kinds of mistakes in the future, I think, personally, I believe government needs to be stronger in order to at least give strong guidelines that cannot be violated, and there needs to be penalties for people that violate. However, the actual building of that needs to, I don't think government should be involved, but should not be predominantly in business, right? It's actually up to the business to develop that, but government should be regulating it and supervising it and making sure these rules and this regulation are upheld. I think that would be my opinion.